Hey, what's happening? My name is D, and welcome back to another episode of Book Reviews with a Regular Dude. Today, we're going to be talking about Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree. Two cozy fantasy stories written by Travis Baldree, who is a full-time audiobook narrator and also a former video game designer, which I thought was pretty cool. It's December, it's kind of the holiday season, so I thought, let's get cozy today. So let's read the premise of Legends and Lattes. After a lifetime of bounties and bloodshed, Viv is hanging up her sword for the last time. The battle-weary orc aims to start fresh, opening the first ever coffee shop in the city of Thune. But old and new rivals stand in the way of success, not to mention the fact that no one has the faintest idea what coffee actually is. If Viv wants to put the blade behind her and make her plans a reality, she won't be able to go it alone. But the true rewards of the uncharted path are the travelers you meet along the way. Whether drawn together by ancient magic, flaky pastry, or a freshly brewed cup, they may become partners, family, and something deeper than she could have ever dreamed. So I'm going to review Legends and Lattes using the 4 C's method. For those of you who don't remember or don't know, the 4 C's are character, conflict, context, and craft. So let's start with character. We focus mainly, almost solely on the main character, Viv. I love this character. I think that she goes through a lot of really subtle character development and growth throughout Legends and Lattes. Viv really struggles with self-acceptance and self-forgiveness, and she has a hard time letting herself let go of who she used to be and fully embrace who she wants to become. I feel like in some ways, Viv's story is kind of like a coming of age story, but for adults. I think a lot of my friends who are slightly older than me have like experiences where they went down a path that was set before them or a path they thought that they wanted, but as they went down, they kind of changed as a person or realized they wanted something different out of life, and then they made a change that was almost like the opposite of what they were doing. Like, for example, I have a couple of friends who were pre-med, or one friend who was a lawyer, and then they became stand-up comedians. I think that's a kind of story that we don't really read a lot or see a lot, and I think that it's just nice to be able to experience that, especially in this kind of fantasy context. Baldree makes it really, really easy to root for and sympathize with Viv, and watching her sort of embrace her vulnerability and her own gentleness, which is kind of at odds with her own like previous career and I guess culture and maybe even racial stereotypes. I don't know. It was really sweet. Another character who stood out for me in Legends of Lattes was Tandri, who is a succubus, Viv's assistant, then business partner, and also love interest. Tandri's a really interesting character for me because even though we don't really get much from her, I don't think we really get anything from her point of view, and we don't really spend a ton of time like getting to know her, we do see her resist and live in resistance to the stereotypes placed upon her because she is a succubus. I think that Tandri could be considered like not a metaphor, but like a symbol or an allegory. I don't know what the right word is, but like Tandri is sort of representing what it's like to be fetishized or sexualized without your consent just for existing, and the book really shows how that weighs on Tandri as a character, and also I guess shows how heavily it can weigh on a person in real life. Then again, like I am a dude, so like take what I say with a whole bag of salt, because I've been fetishized and sexualized before, but not nearly to the same extent as like women or other marginalized genders. I guess what I'm saying is like I think that's something that's being conveyed in the story, but I'm not like, I don't know if I have enough lived experience to speak on that with any like authority or confidence. There are other characters that are kind of minor, but they do like make the book what it is, like Cal and Thimble. Like they don't have much to say or do, but they do add something to the story, and they just make up like a really lovable cast of characters that you just want to hang out with. Moving on to conflict. Because this is a cozy fantasy and the stakes are pretty low, you could say that there isn't a lot of conflict in Legends and Lattes. You could say that, and then I would say, did we read the same book? Viv faces a ton of conflict and a ton of challenges, just like opening a business and not knowing what to do. There's like a mafia storyline where these thugs are trying to shake down Viv for protection money. One of those thugs is harassing Tandri. One of Viv's old allies like becomes her enemy. So there's a fair amount of external conflict presented as challenges of varying sizes. But I would say the main thing that kept the story engaging for me, and I guess the overarching conflict, is internal. I think that Viv really struggles to find ways to deal with a lot of her challenges in a peaceful way because all she's really known is violence. That's oddly relatable for me as a person, and it really resonated. Viv really struggles with feeling unworthy of pursuing the dreams that she's currently pursuing, and goddamn, that was so relatable. That resonated so much, it like physically hurt. Don't worry, I'm fine though. I'm fine. I'm good. I'm fine. Moving on to context, and that's world building, kind of answering the questions, what is this world and who has the power? To be honest, there wasn't like a ton of world building in this book, but that's like not the point. The point is Viv and her coffee shop. I think in order to read this book, you kind of need to have a vague understanding of epic high fantasy. I guess like playing D&D or Skyrim or having read or watched Lord of the Rings or something like that. Like if you don't know what an orc is, this book isn't really going to explain it to you. Like if you don't know what an orc is, this book isn't really going to explain it to you. There's just a lot of like, yeah, you get it right kind of world building, which is totally fine because again, not the point. And I think because this is like set in an epic high fantasy world, but the stakes are low, you could argue that it's sort of subverting the epic high fantasy genre. I don't know if I want to make that argument because I don't want to have that conversation. And I'm not like a big fantasy guy, so I don't necessarily know if I know what I'm talking about. Don't worry, the irony or the humor is not lost on me that I review a lot of fantasy novels, but I keep saying that I'm not a fantasy guy. I know. Like, that's kind of part of the bit. You know what? Something that I didn't put in my notes, but I do want to talk about is I think it was my review of Assistant to the Villain. I talked about how they had this fantasy setting, but they wanted to introduce modern stuff like coffee or donuts. The writer did like a really convoluted, roundabout way of explaining what these things are and introducing these things. It's like the writer of Assistant to the Villain, I forget her name, was really trying to introduce mundane everyday things in a fantastical, magical way so that we're like, yeah, we get it, it's a fantasy. Whereas I think Legends and Lattes, Travis Baldree does an excellent job of just introducing these things, and there's a little bit of hand waving of like, wow, where'd you come up with this or whatever, but like it's not that deep or it's not that big a deal. Like it's just like, oh yeah, now there's scones or now there's cinnamon buns and all that stuff, and there's like sick, and even like to-go cups and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I just think the way that he kind of creates coffee shop culture, which I'm kind of very familiar with because, you know, I've been a musician since I was like, I don't know, 17, 18, and I've played hundreds of shows in empty coffee shops. So I know coffee shops is what I'm trying to say. And he does a really good job of like creating coffee shop culture in a fantasy world. And yeah, that's actually really good world building in a sense because like, yeah, you don't maybe have a great idea of the geography or how magic fully works and yada yada, but you have a great understanding of how like a fantasy, a reflection of modern coffee shop culture is reflected in this fantasy world, and that's actually really cool. I don't know why I didn't have that in my notes. Like I don't know why I didn't just think of it until I started recording, but yeah, that's dope. Anyways, let's move on to craft. There's nothing about Baldree's writing that really blew me away. Like I'm a big fan of that sort of atmospheric, poetic writing like Schwab, Morgenstern, Harrow, and Baldree isn't really doing that, but like he's really good at making you care about stuff that like, in a sense, nothing's really going on for a big part of the book, but you care the whole time. And I was never bored. I was fully engaged, and that's because of the writing. Like, you know, he can't make you care about these characters if they're written poorly. You know what I'm saying? And, I think while I could say that there's maybe no real flavor, that's better than leaving a bad taste in my mouth like some other books that I've reviewed on this channel. So Legends and Lattes, was it good? Yes. Did I enjoy it? So very much. And would I recommend it? Absolutely. Maybe not as an introduction to fantasy, but I would definitely recommend it if you haven't read it already. Moving on to Bookshops and Bonedust, which is a prequel to Legends and Lattes. Let's read this premise. Viv's career with the notorious mercenary company Rackham's Ravens isn't going as planned. Wounded during the hunt for a powerful necromancer, she's packed off against her will to recuperate in a sleepy beach town of Murk. So far from the action, she worries she'll never be able to return to it. What's a thwarted soldier of fortune to do? Spending her hours in a beleaguered bookshop in the company of its foul-mouthed proprietor is the last thing Viv would have predicted, but it may be both exactly what she needs and the seed of changes she couldn't possibly imagine. Still, adventure isn't that far away. A suspicious traveler in gray, a gnome with a chip on her shoulder, a summer fling, and an improbable number of skeletons prove Murk to be more eventful than Viv could have ever expected. I'm not going to redo the 4 Cs because I think I would just end up repeating myself. I could talk about some of they're not new characters because it's a prequel, but I guess they are new characters. And I could talk about this, like the different kind of conflict or whatever, but more or less my answers would be the same. They're not really answers. My opinions would be the same. Anyways, I'm just going to talk about what I liked about Bookshops and Bonedust. We see Viv at the beginning of her mercenary career, whereas Legends and Lattes is kind of the end of her mercenary career and then the beginning of a new career. And we see Viv reveling in her identity that comes from her strength and her power and her capability as a warrior. And when that's taken away, she almost rejects the peace and the slowness that she'll come to cultivate for herself later in life, as we see in Legends and Lattes, which I thought was really interesting. And like the premise said, the seeds are planted nonetheless, but it's kind of like reverse character development, or I don't know how to explain it, but it's like I really admired Baldree's writing more in Bookshops and Bonedust because he had to be so thoughtful about the kind of person Viv becomes. So he had to keep all that in mind and then kind of reverse engineer who Viv is now. And I forget the gnome character's name, but the gnome becomes one of Viv's closest friends and her sort of almost like the Sokka to her Zuko or something. I don't know what I'm saying. That's a terrible comparison. It was really sweet to watch Viv build a really beautiful platonic friendship through falling in love with books and stories and stuff. And I think that I have a couple of friends who our friendship sort of really deepened once we were both oh, you also like to read. Even I don't know if this is oversharing or whatever, but there's a friend, or there's a person in my friend group who I've known for years, but we've never really gotten along until we sat down, or not even sat down, but I think I mentioned books or something like that. And then she was like, "Oh, you read?" And I was like, "Yeah, I read a little bit, yada, yada." And we got to talking about books, and we have such different tastes in books, but we were able to have really meaningful, pleasant conversations about why we love stories and why we love books, even though we read completely different genres. And so that was really cool. And so I think just having experiences like that made watching Viv's experience of forming this really beautiful friendship all the sweeter. You know what I'm saying? I guess what I'm saying is I'm an orc warrior on the inside. I'll never be that sexy though, and that's okay. Oh, was that weird to say? I kind of want to play that Family Guy clip. Oh, no one finds power sexy. I'm the only one who finds power sexy. But I don't want to find it. So we also see Viv have a sweet short romance in Bookshops and Bonedust. And I liked it because there's a little bit of romance in Legends and Lattes, but to be completely honest, it's pretty subtle and there's one smooch. And not that I'm saying that romance is rated in smooches or whatever. That'd be such a funny thing. A smooch scale. 5 out of 10 smooches or something. Anyways, it was really sweet, and I appreciated that it was a little bit more overt than in Legends and Lattes. But, you know, at the same time, it doesn't really, like, add much to Viv's overall story. Because, sometimes flings do add a lot to someone's story, and sometimes they don't. That's the nature of flings. Why am I talking about this? The talk around baking in Bookshops and Bonedust made me hungry. And so again, I guess that's a testament to Baldree's writing, because I think, like, when you write about food, if you can instill hunger in someone or make them crave like a scone or a cinnamon bun or whatever, that's good writing. Because there's some authors who write a lot about food or use food imagery, and I'm just like, what do you mean the sun is a yoki thing? That's weird and upsetting. I will say that I think there's, like, more conflict more external conflict in Bookshops and Bonedust, and part of that is probably because we're at the beginning of Viv's story as a mercenary. And so, there's an overarching plot, there's an incoming threat, which are kind of more typical to your regular fantasy books, I think. That was really cool. I was engaged and intrigued and captivated, but there is still all the sweetness and coziness that I loved from Legends and Lattes. It's just that instead of, like, dealing with problems almost episodically, there's, like, an overarching thing that comes to a head near the end of the book. And I guess the stakes feel higher, even though you kind of know, like, because it's a prequel, Viv's gonna be fine. There's an epilogue at the end of Bookshops and Bonedust that I really loved. It brings things kind of full circle, and also kind of alludes to maybe more stuff can happen, and we haven't seen the last of Viv or Tandri or I forget her name, another chick. Yeah, I really liked Bookshops and Bonedust. I read them, like, basically back to back, so it'd be so hard for me to be like, which one do you like more? But I really liked it. And, same 3 questions, same 3 answers. Was it good? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Would I recommend it? Yes. Some people read prequels first, like if they're new to a series that's been out for a minute. And I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think that reading it in the order that the books were published is the way to go. That's just my personal preference. Maybe some other people disagree, but I think that it's almost, like, more interesting to see Viv's character fleshed out backwards. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, fun fact, I almost went into business opening a book cafe with my mother, which would have been cool, but also probably a really bad idea because me and my mother don't get along, like, at all. But yeah, that's something that I've always liked the idea of doing. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it to the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Apparently, when we get to 10,000 subscribers, y'all get to pick a tattoo for me to get, and then I'm gonna go get that tattoo somewhere. So that'll be fun. I guess I'll vlog it or something. I don't know. If you want to support the channel, support what I'm trying to do here, you can tip me /buy me a coffee. And if you want to support the channel on a more regular basis and gain access to exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. There you get 2 extra videos per month. That's a rant review and the continuation of my Shadow and Bone reaction series, as well as access to my private Discord server, the Don't Fret Club Discord server. We've been talking about movies, books, anime, D&D. I don't play D&D, but other people talking about it. Video games a little bit. People are showing their artwork, talking about their creative writing projects. It's a lot of fun. I love the community that's building in the private Discord server. And so if you want to be a part of that and gain exclusive access to some premium exclusive content, that doesn't make any sense. Sleep before you make videos. What the fuck? Make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon. And if Patreon's not really your thing and you want more content from me, make sure you consider subscribing to my second channel, Don't Fret 64, talking about anime and manga. I'm reacting to Haikyuu right now, and I'm going to start talking about manga. I've said that like 3 times now. I'm going to start talking about manga pretty soon here. And yeah, I don't think I need to plug anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video. My name is D, and don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace out.